The next presentation. Dr. Danielle Wood, a scholar of social development. The title is Discovering the Designs That Enable Societal Development. Ultra-small satellites offering a fresh viewpoint from the space. Dr. Wood, floor over to you.
Good morning.
おはようございます、皆様。このような方。
Thank you for this wonderful invitation. I am a scholar of societal development. I prepared for this opportunity in the university. I studied language and history. I traveled to Sevilla, a beautiful city in Spain, to learn Spanish. I studied culture, which is common for someone who wants to think about our society and how to develop it further. I also traveled to Kenya and volunteered at a school with children and learned about the lives and opportunities that they faced there in Kenya. The name of the school is Chambo Cha Upendo in Swahili. It means vessels of love. Now, these experiences are all true, but it is not the entire story. I enjoyed learning these facts of culture and of language and of history, but also I had another interest. I was very interested in space. Here you are seeing an example of a galaxy as viewed by an X-ray telescope called Chandra. It was launched by NASA in 1999, and it shows us a view of distant galaxies that we can only see by leaving the Earth's atmosphere and putting a special X-ray observatory into space. I find these kinds of images beautiful and inspiring. When this X-ray observatory was launched, I had the privilege to be there as a young person and to watch as the rocket carried it out of the sky and into space to begin its mission. I was only 17, and on that night I decided I would study aerospace engineering and become an engineer. Now, I had this question: can I be an engineer and also a scholar and a worker in societal development? For several years, I didn't know the answer, but I continued to learn engineering. I learned how to build items that can be flown in space. This is one example of a project with robots that can fly on the International Space Station. I was very fortunate to work at NASA, and this is showing the Goddard Space Flight Center. It is one of the 10 NASA centers where they focus on studying the Earth and on studying the universe with instruments and sensors from satellites. It was here that I actually learned an important connection between my love of space and my desire to contribute to societal development. I learned about a project called Servir. Servir is a Spanish word. It means to serve. And this is an example of a project. It is a partnership between NASA and the United States Agency for International Development. The focus of this project is to combine questions from countries around the world and ask how we can use data from NASA Earth observation satellites to answer these questions. The Servir network includes partners in countries around the world who are all working together to use environmental data to help improve societal development. And when I learned about this project, I realized, aha, yes, I can indeed be a space engineer and a scholar of societal development at the same time. This is one example of one of the teams working in Kenya that is there using satellite data to address challenges in topics such as water management, food security, and disaster response. I'm here to share a vision of the future. In the future, community development leaders, like all of you, will be able to easily access services enabled by space as you pursue your important initiatives. This will allow us to discover new designs that enable societal development. Now, we can ask, what is development? And one helpful answer comes from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It is a current global consensus on 17 areas in which we want to improve human well-being. And one aspect for the space community right now is to ask, how can technology enabled by space help us advance these important sustainable development goals? In fact, there is a team in the United Nations and a committee called the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. They come together every year, several times, to discuss such questions. And next year, in 2018, there will be a special meeting of this committee. It is the 50th anniversary of the first major United Nations Committee on Space for Development. It will be Unispace plus 50, and it will gather people from around the world to ask how we use technology enabled by space to promote sustainable development. So let me give you some more examples. Already today, community development leaders around the world are using technology enabled by space in many areas, and I'll give you a few key examples. We, of course, have satellite communication, satellite-based positioning and timing, as well as Earth observation. Those are some of the most well-known. But also, we can benefit from microgravity research and from technology that begins in space and is later transferred to other sectors, as well as the ineffable aspect of inspiration and education. Let me share some more examples in each of those areas. In the area of satellite-based communication, here I am showing examples of inflatable antennas that are provided during disaster response when the technology on the ground for communication is no longer available. These round antennas can be brought in a small suitcase on a plane and deployed quickly and connect with satellite communications to enable coordination. Another example is using the satellite-based positioning and timing information. In the US, we have the Global Positioning System. Here in Japan, you also contribute the QZSS positioning and timing system. In this example, we see a case to put a receiver on wildlife to track where they are going, which helps scientists understand their behavior and improve their opportunities for survival. Another example is in the area of satellite-based Earth observation. Here I am showing the 20 or so satellites operated by NASA that observe the Earth and produce valuable scientific data. Many of these satellites are done in collaboration with partners, including Japan's Aerospace Exploration Agency, as well as partners in Europe and around the world. Most of NASA's satellite activity is done as part of international collaboration, and the data from these satellites is shared freely with anyone. These satellites represent a variety of different missions. They measure characteristics of the Earth, including atmospheric and ocean and land and the glaciers. Some of the satellites give you a picture of the vegetation. This image is showing an annual cycle of the breathing of the Earth as the vegetation on the land and as the chlorophyll-based life in the ocean expands and contracts. And this is information that is gathered from multiple satellites and combined into this animation. We can also take information from satellites with images and understand how urban areas are changing over time. By looking at these images and changing from year to year, we learn about how our urban environments are expanding and continuing to change. Here is another example from South Africa, where a satellite sensor is monitoring heat from space and provides an automated system to produce warnings and alerts with regard to fires to allow people to take action if needed. Now, in these examples, the information from the satellites is relatively clear. If you see the heat, or if you see the changing in the visual image, you know something what you should do. However, many of the types of information we gain from environmental satellites are not quite as simple. I'll give an example of the kinds of steps that are required to develop useful results from satellite Earth observation data. Here I am showing a bit of a value chain that includes 8 steps. We will not go through it in detail, but I'll highlight that the sections in green are typically performed by a government space agency. In the US, NASA will do these steps of designing a major Earth observation satellite, operating it, and providing the initial scientific work to confirm the data is correct and useful. They may then combine data from the satellites with very high-quality scientific models that give us the best possible estimate of the parameters on Earth: the temperature, the humidity, the pressure, the temperature of the water, and the quality of the vegetation. Now, the sections in red, this is an invitation to the whole world, because now these are steps that often are best done by commercial or nonprofit partners who use data that's been provided freely through a government investment to now create a very useful information tool that harnesses information both from Earth observation satellites and from other sources, from cultural and medical information that is all combined to answer a question. Ultimately, this information is only useful if it is used to inform decision-making. And completing all of these steps remains an excellent challenge that calls us to action. I'll give an example that shows the collaboration between the United States and Japan. This is the Global Precipitation Measurement Mission, which is a joint mission between NASA and JAXA, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. It is such a tight coordination because NASA has built some of the instrument and Japan has built another part, and they have put them together and launched them from Japan. And you see there's also other satellites in the picture because, in fact, it's really a collaboration of many satellites together that are all measuring rainfall and snowfall. And the computers we have today are so powerful that, in fact, every half an hour, all the data from each of these satellites is combined and produced to make a new animation that shows us the global view of rainfall around the world. And this is powerful. It's both our best estimate of the rainfall as well as understanding of the intensity, and this information can be added to models that are used by scientists who understand the flow of water and to determine the risk of flooding. Meanwhile, it's also helpful in other topics, such as understanding which areas of the world are in danger of famine or of drought. This is an example of output that is from an overall model and a collaborative tool led by the United States government, including NASA, our United States Geological Survey, and our Agency for International Development. They combine the information from many satellites to understand the state of vegetation and rainfall and determine where there will be possible risk of food shortages in several countries in Africa. Here, the key decision is where information needs to be determined for where food aid can be provided before people are in need of extra food. Another example is the need to address malaria. There are several parts of the world where countries are committed to controlling or eliminating malaria and eliminating deaths due to malaria. They know that if they can put the bed nets and the spraying in the right place where there is most risk, they have the opportunity to control the spread of the disease before it continues to grow. Now, the behavior of mosquitoes that spread malaria is partly influenced by the weather. So data from satellites can help us understand how we are going to target interventions, such as using bed nets or spraying to reduce the spread of malaria. This is just an example from one of the papers I have written on the kind of tools we could use using Earth observation satellites, as well as positioning information to identify where we see the risk of the weather and environmental conditions that might spread action of mosquitoes, as well as the plan to implement distribution of bed nets and spraying and putting all that together into a model that informs an action plan to eliminate malaria. Countries in southern Africa are executing plans like this right now. And here's one example of a model that is combining information from NASA satellite data as well as public health data and tracking malaria cases in Peru. These are all inspiring examples showing that we already are using satellite technology and other space-enabled technologies to address societal development challenges. I mentioned microgravity research, and the best place right now to do that is on the International Space Station, which is a partnership of many countries, including the United States and Japan, as well as partners in Europe and Canada. The International Space Station is huge, is the size of an American football field, and has many locations inside to do research. We are learning that materials and the human body behave quite differently in this microgravity environment. Therefore, we can learn things about these materials and about our life on Earth, often in an accelerated way that improves our understanding for manufacturing and for health. And I referred actually to the words coming directly from some of the teams here in Japan, who talked about the fact that studying the human body in space can bring great benefit to life on Earth. In some senses, our bodies age faster in space, especially because our bones and our muscles deteriorate, and it is very similar to the challenges faced by the elderly. So we use research on astronauts to understand how to create health solutions for people on Earth. Another area that we can use from space technology to address global challenges is to look for inventions that were created for space exploration and transfer them for practical use on Earth. Here are 3 examples in the area of food and water, which are basic needs for human survival. Astronauts who operate in a space station or who are traveling to a distant planet are in many ways living in a very resource-constrained environment. And they need to be able to use their water over and over to filter whatever water they have and use it again. The special technology that allows this can also be used on Earth and is being used, and it is a way to filter water from anywhere on Earth and make it clean to drink. There are also 2 examples here of ways we have developed technology for space that improves the life of food on Earth and also has seeds that are resistant to disease. All of these were created for space exploration but have great benefit also to life on Earth. I mentioned inspiration, and I want to give credit to an amazing organization here in Japan called UNISEC. Has anyone heard of UNISEC in the audience? I encourage you to learn about it. It is a nonprofit consortium based in Japan originally, but is now spreading around the world. Their goal is to involve students, especially at the university level, with hands-on experiences regarding satellite engineering or other aerospace technology. They take simple, low-cost approaches that can be used in any country, and they have the goal of enabling people around the world to be engaged with aerospace engineering experiences in 100 countries by the year 2020. They are well on their way. And that was a vision that started in Japan and is spreading to many countries already. Another aspect of inspiration is the role that we play in space to let us dream about the distant universe. And I want to say that this aspect of doing scientific research about space is not just for countries that have traditionally been involved with space, it is for everyone. And here's an example from the SKA, the Square Kilometre Array Project, which will happen in both Africa, in several countries, and in Australia. This is one of the early precursor activities for a radio telescope, and this will end up eventually to be a series of telescopes that are connected across countries in Africa and Australia, helping us peer deep into the universe to understand its secrets and to gain further inspiration. Now, I have shown excellent stories about the fact that space technology is already being used to advance societal development. I also will share that because of the role of space-enabled technology in societal development, countries around the world have made it a high priority to increase their knowledge on space engineering. As a scholar of development, I have explored the pathways that countries have taken to advance their activities in space engineering. Now, when a country wants to begin, for example, its first national satellite project, they have several choices. I show 4 examples here, They can buy a satellite directly from a company, which is becoming more and more affordable. They can encourage the universities to do a research project. They can also send engineers and scientists to study abroad and learn from experienced countries. But many countries choose the fourth option shown here, which is to do a collaborative project with local engineers and foreign partners to develop knowledge by working with people with great experience. And so I did research on a number of countries that have followed this path. I wanted to find out, how do they decide which of these four areas to use? And how do they design a project that allows them to reach their goal of learning new engineering capability and becoming more autonomous in space engineering? Here are some of the countries that have taken this model. Each has developed a project at the national level, led by the government, to have a national satellite engineering activity and a new organization that can build satellites locally. They have worked with international partners, but they have the goal to eventually have autonomy and local knowledge in space engineering. They believe it is an important aspect of their societal development. I had the privilege to learn from many of the pioneering countries that have been in this field of adopting satellite technology. I was in South Africa, where they have built the first domestically built satellite in the African continent. This is in Nigeria. They have partnered with both the United Kingdom and with China to develop national satellites. I've also traveled in Kenya, where they are partnering with Italy to have their first national satellite. And in the UAE, there's an organization in Dubai that has developed satellites along with partners in Korea, and they now also have a national space agency, which you may have heard is planning to send a spacecraft to Mars very soon. I've also traveled in many parts of Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand. Each of these countries has decided that investing in local knowledge about space engineering is highly important to their national development. Here in Japan, I've seen that this country plays a leadership role in sharing knowledge about space engineering with countries around the world. The United Nations asked which country would like to host an international training program, and Japan said yes. And here at the Kyushu Institute of Technology, where I have collaborated, there are a number of engineers from many countries around the world who are building their first satellite for their country. And it is an international environment where many languages are spoken, and everyone is coming together to build a network of future satellite engineers. We can see around the Asian region, many countries have a commitment to be involved with space engineering. And I'm highlighting here the years for major milestones for some of the countries in this region when they have bought their first satellites and been involved with major next steps in capability. It is actually an exciting trend right now. It's not exactly a space race, but countries are watching their neighbors and getting inspired to have more activity in space engineering. I did some historical studies to understand that it takes decades for countries to become very autonomous in advanced satellite engineering. However, it's also true that the technology for space engineering is becoming more and more mature and accessible, so any country can get involved. My work also shows the different political models that countries experience. Often at the beginning of a mission, there is a lot of political support for space. And after 1 or 2 satellites, people don't want to pay for it anymore. So there's a need to show the benefit through new technology or new services. Now, from what I've shared, we can see that a lot of progress has been made in applying space technology for societal development. However, more work remains. And in fact, we are at a time when we want to undo some long-term barriers that have been in place since the beginning of the space era. I'll give a few examples. Traditional satellite engineering requires great care and expense because once you put something in space, normally you don't get to touch it again. So we have spent a long time building satellites with really advanced engineering that makes it difficult for new players to get involved. Meanwhile, we've collected overwhelming amounts of free data that's available about the Earth, and in fact, there's so much we're not even using it all. In the area of communication, there is excellent coverage all over the world. However, it is mainly provided for profit by companies that are targeting those with funds, and developing communities may not be served by this capability. On the side of space launch, traditionally we have faced many barriers with the cost and the limited capacity for launch. And so many countries may be able to have a satellite but not find an opportunity to launch it. Microgravity research has traditionally been limited to not all the countries being involved, and there's only a few platforms where you can take things to experience microgravity. And in the area of spin-offs, it's been somewhat haphazard, meaning we usually find unexpected connections between inventions from space and transfer them, but we never quite know when that's going to happen. The good news, however, is that the international space community is busy trying to create innovative solutions that address these barriers, and we are witnessing right now a renaissance in the space community, so that in the future we will see more ways to apply space technology for societal development. I'll give you a few examples of the players around the world that are redefining our assumptions in the space community. Here we're looking on the category of space engineering. The company called Planet has developed approaches to build mini satellites, and they build so many that some will fail and some will be successful, but that is okay. Rather than doing very high quality risk control, they build many and continue to operate even when they fail. These STUV satellites are being released through many methods, including the space station, and they are monitoring the Earth with imagers similar to what's in your cell phone. We also see collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. The United Nations has partnered with a company called Sierra Nevada. They are creating an opportunity for emerging space countries to put space experiments on the newly upcoming vehicle that Sierra Nevada is building called Dream Chaser. And they will now have an invitation for people to apply and propose new space missions for societal development. We also see new approaches to reusability in launch vehicles with companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX, who have both demonstrated they can launch vehicles and land them again safely, which is proposing new options for the launch life cycle, which hopefully will bring costs down in the future. As well, we are seeing a move toward human tourism in space, which will also create more routine access for humans, instruments, and research experiments. And all of this is going to change our assumptions about how we pay for space and how often we go there. Meanwhile, it's not just in the US. There is an exciting company in New Zealand called Rocket Lab that is trying to also develop a small satellite launch vehicle. And keep watching for them in the news because they are continuing to improve and test. Here in Japan, we have one of the 5 companies and competitors in the Google Lunar X Prize. They are aiming to put a vehicle on the moon and take video, and we see a lot of inspirational stories in the companies that are remaining. All of this is helping us see that we can redefine our assumptions about the barriers that make it difficult to operate in space. Another example is on the engineering side. The company called Made in Space is demonstrating already on the International Space Station how we can do 3D printing in space. And I think of a day when instead of launching complete satellites, we can instead launch the ingredients for satellites and reuse them and reconfigure them as needed, so that we'll have more options for how we can get what we need into space. So I've envisioned a future where these barriers we were seeing will be reduced, because now we'll have new satellite engineering methods and new ways to create what we need when we need it. We will continue to see a commercial market develop to use the data we already have and the new data that's coming and combine it with emerging data management and artificial intelligence to better understand the data and answer important questions. We will see more options for serving the communication markets that are also catering the needs of less developed and economically advantaged communities. We will also see, of course, many new actors in the launch vehicle market, and that will bring down costs, but also create new engineering options for how we do launch. Ultimately, that will also create more places and more time to do microgravity research, to understand our human bodies and manufacturing and medicine even better. And that, of course, will lead to more spin-offs, because we will have people from many industries involved with space who are all bringing their ideas and finding ways to use technology from space for societal needs. So I believe the future is bright, but there is more work to do. Of course, this event today is partly co-hosted by the MIT Media Lab, and the Media Lab has created a space exploration initiative. You will hear later in this meeting from Ariel Ekblal, who is the student founder of this initiative, And part of the goal is to spread opportunities within the Media Lab and with our partners to access space in all the ways we just mentioned. I had the privilege to join the opening event to celebrate this event. And we had people coming together to ask, what will be the future of space research? How will we change our options to engage with space as people who are improving life on Earth and as we expand our life beyond Earth? And for that reason, I'm very excited to announce that I will be joining the Media Lab starting in January 2018 as a faculty member. And I'm creating a new research lab called Space Enabled. I will continue to ask, how can we use existing technology and how can we create new technology to apply space capabilities for societal development? And in this work, we will have this vision. We want to advance justice in Earth's complex systems using technology enabled by space. And this requires multiple types of thinking. On one hand, I'm still a satellite engineer, but I am also a scholar asking, what is happening in our culture? What are the aspects of our culture we need to overcome, such as racism, or our desire to have one group controlling the behavior of another? How can we use social science theory to understand the challenges better? How can we also use complex systems modeling capabilities to understand how technology, culture, and policy are interacting? With that foundation, we can then design engineering and software-based solutions enabled by space, and ultimately evaluate how we can make the best applications to solve important challenges in partnership with community leaders who understand the needs much better than I do. This is the vision that I'm living toward, and I look forward to staying in touch with all of you as we perform this activity. I will return back then to a vision from space of the place I went to in Kenya when I was first learning about societal development. I continue to be inspired by the children that I met there, and my goal is that they have opportunities as I do to explore how they can become community leaders and apply space technology and all the great capabilities we have to improve society. Thank you so much.
ウッド様ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.